In this month's Economic Update, Kaplan Professional Education's Michael Pollock speaks to an industry economist about the short-term domestic and global economic outlook.
Welcome to Kaplan Professional Education's monthly Economic Update. I'm Michael Pollock, and this month we're speaking to airport economist and University of New South Wales academic Tim Harcourt. Thanks for joining us today, Tim.
No, my pleasure.
If we could take a look firstly at the domestic situation, Tim. What measures does Australia have available in response to China's recent dumping of steel and aluminium onto the local market?
The complication with China is that China's traditionally been a planned economy, not a market economy. And in order for China to join the WTO, we gave them market economy status. Now, the fear of Australian steel makers and others around the world is that China can artificially basically set the price of steel very low and dump it on markets around the world and effectively put the competition out of business and then claim it's a market economy. And so for the most part, all you can do is put up countervailing duties or put a stop to it.
Turning to the US, what would be the impact domestically if the US pulled away from trade agreements and took a more protectionist approach?
I actually think it'd be job destroying for the United States to be protectionist. When you look at the data, exporters pay higher wages, better health and safety, they're more job creation capacity than the domestic economy. So I think it could be quite disastrous for the US in its own sense. And if there was retaliation from other countries, then it could be much worse. So I would say reverting to protectionism would be the worst thing that the US could do for the American worker right now.
So looking at China, Tim, what are the likely implications for Australia as China makes the uncertain transition away from an over-reliance on construction and debt?
Well, China's going through a great transition from a nation of shippers to a nation of shoppers, if you like, moving away from export orientation to domestic consumption and investment and boosting its services sector. I think it's actually quite good news for Australia in the sense that China is building up all these second and third tier cities, Wuhan and Chongqing and Chengdu, little country towns of 15 million people, and they're demanding Australian architects, Australian construction firms building the airports, the roads, the civil buildings. So in many ways I think it's actually quite good news for Australia, but it will be export opportunities on the ground within China rather than just selling rocks and crops, putting them on ships and sending them over there. So it'll be much more hands-on, and probably Australian companies will now spend a lot of their people hours in China itself rather than just sticking things on ports back here.
And finally to Europe, the British PM has said that the process of Brexit won't be plain sailing. What do you think she means by that?
I think the British were shocked in many ways by the Brexit result. I think even the Leave camp were surprised at how successful they were. At the same time, I think the predictions that it will be a disaster for the British economy are greatly exaggerated. Britain's a major economic power in the world. It's got trade arrangements with countries all over the world as a result of its empire and being a large OECD economy. And in many ways, I think Britain being tied up in Europe let Australia off the hook. Perhaps the British weren't as competitive as they should have been in China and Japan and Southeast Asia. So the new Britain will be more assertive, more aggressive internationally, probably not such good news for Australia. I think for the most part, Brexit will take some time because they have to basically ratify the articles and make it happen. And I think by the time they withdraw from Europe formally, they will have been able to forge important trade links with China, Japan, the US and other countries, even Europe itself. So for the most part, I think Britain's economic power will remain, and they'll still have very strong trade ties with Europe. The only difference will be is that Brussels won't be able to tell them how big their sausages can be and impose all sorts of regulations on the British domestic economy, which I think, if anything's probably held them back, not raced them forward.
Thanks very much for your time today, Tim.
No, my pleasure.
That brings us to the end of the November PD sessions. Thanks for watching. If you have any feedback or questions, please drop us a line at pdcontent@kaplan.edu.au. I'm Ron Wilson. See you again next time.